Okay, welcome everyone to Chapter 18, Colonial Encounters in Asia and Africa. This chapter explores the tighter web of connections brought by the second wave of colonial expansion in the 19th century. And the legacies of imperialism have had profound effects on the 20th and 21st centuries. And since the experience of imperialism has shaped ideology, a clear study of imperialism is necessary in order to understand certain aspects of historical argumentation and interpretation. So you should be able to analyze how the period of the 19th century imperialism compares with earlier European colonialism. Technology and industrial production are especially useful in analyzing these patterns of continuity and change. And think about analyzing how states with existing colonies strengthened over their zones of influence. And when examining imperialism, discuss or think about how European powers used various political, economic, cultural, environmental, and social methods of domination. Imperialism is one of the topics that touches on all of the major AP World History themes. And the various effects of imperialism on labor are analyzed at length in this chapter. You should be able to identify the differences among colonial economies that used forced labor, cash crop agriculture, or wage labor. And gender roles also transformed dramatically by the inclusion of vast amounts of the world into the global economy. And also in this chapter, notions of race and ethnic identity emerged during this period of imperialism. Nationalism, which was first introduced in chapter 16, became a potent factor in the creation of new national identities that developed as a response to imperialism. Even social Darwinism as an ideology served as a tool of imperialism. And so it's important to reflect on the ideological shift that occurred as a result of this racist application of scientific rationalism. And as a justification for imperialism, social Darwinism represented a departure from the other forms of cultural supremacy seen in earlier expansions of empire. And examine imperialism by looking beyond the European domination of non-European colonies and instead focus on the response within those colonies to European presence. The degree to which individuals within a colony assimilated or resisted imperialism provides a wide range of responses to imperialism. And there are case studies that can also place the broader trends of imperialism within the historical thinking skill of contextualization. Okay, let's talk about this image here. This picture shows a ceremonial procession called a durbar. And in it, the Indian state assembles dignitaries and presents them to the public with displays of splendor and wealth in order to demonstrate power and success of the state. And this particular durbar actually marked the coronation of the British monarch Edward VII in 1907. So let's see what blends of British and Indian culture we see here. Most notable are the officials walking alongside the elephants. Their red dress is reminiscent of British uniforms, even though they're Indians. And the parade sticks in their hands are topped with the symbol for the British crown. I'm not sure if you guys can see that. So who in this painting holds the highest social standing? And how can you tell? Well, the man in the British uniform on top of the first elephant would have the highest social standing, followed by the woman in the English dress next to him, and their place on top of the elephant shielded from the sun by a parasol held by a servant behind them suggests their importance. And as English leaders among the Indian natives, they undoubtedly enjoyed the highest social status in India under the British Empire. But it's a nice mix of some aspects of British and Indian culture. Alright, let's start with industry and empire. At the beginning of the chapter, there's a little excerpt, and the author here describes his experience in post-colonial Kenya. And the focus is on the discovery of reluctance to teach Africans the English language and a real colonial concern to maintain distance between white and blacks. And so here we see even a very large gap between the races even after colonization. The British, French, Germans, Italians, Belgians, even the Portuguese, Russians, Americans, all had colonies. And the colonial policies for these countries varied depending on the time and the country that was involved. And their actions and reactions of the colonialized people also shaped individual colonial experiences. And the Industrial Revolution fueled much of Europe's expansion. The demand for raw materials and agricultural products, the need for markets to sell those European products once they were finished goods. European capitalists often invested money abroad, and foreign markets kept workers within Europe employed. And so as the British and other European economies began to specialize in industrial production, they had an increased demand for specific raw materials from the tropical world, such as metals, oils, cotton, rubber, and colonies would serve as captive and cheap sources of these commodities. And conversely, colonies could be captive markets for European exports, such as British cotton textiles, and indeed, when the British began importing mass-produced cotton textiles to India, they reversed a centuries-long trade imbalance. A previously poor Europe had been desirous of Asian goods with little to offer in return, and now that's been switched. And as Western industrialization in the 19th century was closely tied to a new and expanding phase of capitalism, colonies naturally served as sources for investment. And with the rise of nationalism in Europe, average citizens suddenly felt they had a stake in imperial expansion. And viewing the struggles of European empires in Africa and Asia as a great gain, they felt pride in acquiring more territories and hated seeing real estate go to a rival empire. And so this growth of mass nationalism in Europe made imperialism widely popular. Italy and Germany unified by 1871, because before it was just the Papal States and the German principalities. And colonies were also seen as a status symbol for many of these Europeans amongst their foreign neighbors. And the industrial age developments made overseas expansion possible. Steamships, underwater telegraphs, quinine, so they could go deeper into disease-infected areas, and breech-loading rifles and machine guns made conquest ultimately possible because of their superior firepower. Now, Europeans' perception of the other changed during the period of industrialization. In the past or before, Europeans had largely defined others in religious terms, but they had also adopted many foreign ideas and techniques, and they mingled more freely with Asian and African elites. And they had even seen technologically simpletons or simple people at times as noble savages. And so the technological advances that made these new imperial expansions possible, and the faster steamships, better guns, and global communication networks gave Europeans a marked tactical advantage over the pre-industrial societies. Medical developments like quinine to prevent and treat malaria allowed the fragile European body to enter and hopefully survive in the tropics. And for many European observers, the idea that technological superiority indicated some sort of larger racial superiority, and that was axiomatic. A variety of pseudoscientific theories were developed to explain the power differential between the industrial West and the pre-industrial East and South. And the industrial age promoted a secular arrogance among Europeans. And this is sometimes combined with religious superiority, or a sense of religious superiority. And European opinion of other cultures in Africa and Asia dropped because of that. And so there's a new kind of racism that developed, and it was expressed in terms of modern science. Specifically, social Darwinism. Racist justifications of empire hijacked and bastardized the work of Charles Darwin, unfortunately, arguing that competition among the white nations and people of color was a natural occurrence and the victors should not feel guilty. So it was their way to justify and rationalize racism, which, like I said, completely hijacks the work of Charles Darwin. And Europeans also felt a sense of responsibility to the weaker races, and they saw it as their duty to civilize them. They brought education, healthcare, Christianity, good systems and stable systems of government, and it was regarded as progress and civilization that they were bringing to these poor countries. And so with social Darwinism, there was an effort to apply Darwin's evolutionary theory to human history. And that's how they didn't feel guilty about what they were doing. And that is the end of section 1.